first is the development in the womb of the human kingdom, and it is birthed out as this female word, these trebled, translated Exodus, because that is the point of birthing. A curious thing to me is both of these documents are authored by James. New Testament word James is the Old Testament word Jacob. And most of the New Testament words come from the Old Testament. So if we understand the Alpha, which is first, translated Genesis, we can understand the Omega, because they're the same point on the circle. Everything is circular. So I want to connect for you that word Jacob in what I've just laid out. Jacob appears as the twin of earth, and Jacob is called the worm in another place. And the reason that Jacob is the worm is that is the embryo of the human kingdom being formed. This does not happen until quite a ways into the creation process. Well, where did the earth and worm come from? They came from laughter, and laughter came from a multitude of nations. Well, what are the multitude of nations? The multitude of nations are all the nations of this earth, including the human nation. But the plant, the animal, the insect, the birds, all of those things came first. Well, where did this multitude of nations come from? This multitude of nations came from the flames of the east, in the place where the white mountain of ice was being destroyed by the heat and the wind. There is the High Father with a dominant head from the flames of the east fell to Lower Egypt that is being formed and drank of the well of living water of Lower Egypt. And this is the place where we get the hearing of the roar of the waters in the first creation. Now, this isn't the human hearing, except we could allude to that being the ear being formed in the embryo. Jacob is the twin of earth. It's the twin of the MasterShip Egypt being formed, that earth. But the worm is the embryo of the human kingdom, and that embryo is built by the 12th builder from the flames of the east, from the house being destroyed by the wind, heat, and water. That 12th builder is given the undergarment of soles of feet and palms of hands. That is translated as the coat of many colors. And that 12th builder is also the mouth that attaches to the well of the worm, and that well attaches to the cave of double portions, Machpelah. And in this cave of double portions is where we find laughter buried, and this is where the heart and the lungs, this is where the breath of life is. And I'm not going to tell you more about that story, but this 12th builder is the one that comes to rule over all the seed of Egypt. The ruler over all the seed of Egypt is the human kingdom that had been formed in the womb of Egypt. It is the Egyptian treasury of glorious rest. It is what was drawn out of the water, translated Moses. It is the Ark of the Covenant. It is the Ark of the Testimony. It is all of those things that the human kingdom represents. Most of my stories, my early stories, the early videos are going to be based upon first, to lay that strong foundation. Because once you can understand how to work with the ancient scrolls and to understand them, it will just make life very much simpler. When we do away with gender and we do away with people, we have erased most of the reasons for all the wars we've ever had in modern times. Because most of the wars in modern times are based around these religious interpretations that create people where there are no people. And when we see that the father of a multitude of nations of laughter is our inheritance, and that there's a hearing that's coming along, then we have nothing to argue about who came first. Is Jacob the ancestor of the human race? Absolutely, but not as an adult, full-grown man. Is the multitude of nations, translated Abraham, our ancient elder? Absolutely, but not as a human being. And all of this goes back into the first united ox head, where the water is, where all the intentions were placed in the water, and there's no new water. Those intentions were to create a lofty self-entity. This is the lofty self-entity that was created in the first chapters. And in this lofty self-entity was the womb, was the embryo growing of the master kingdom that is supposed to be the lofty self-entity that masters itself, that rules over itself, that is the priest of its temple, that is the head of the house, that is the husband over the vineyard. That is what those stories are about. And if we can see that, I believe we can erase a lot of the divisive separation that has happened between people groups. Now, whether you've read one line of scripture or not, you have been affected by not so much by the translation, but by the interpretations that have come out of this translation. The interpretations of gender, the interpretations of stories about people killing people. That is not what it's about. Now, as the human kingdom, we think we're the top flag on the flagpole, and we think we're the top man on the mountain, but guess what, folks? We're not. We're the little child. We're the little child. And that little child was totally prepared for by the creation of all that there is in the universe. Those are our elders, and they have bowed themselves down to help us, not to let us be over them, but to guide and help us in our journey. Now, there's a great portion of the human kingdom that's still in the playpen. But before the playpen, there was the birthing of the Egyptian treasury of glorious rest. That was the human kingdom. We came out in rest, and we got out of rest because that's a process of growing. We have to learn to walk and talk and learn how to behave. Well, we've been in the playpen, pulling hair, poking eyes, beating each other over with our toys, our atomic bombs and our guns and all of that stuff. But I think there's a mass movement in the earth to find a more peaceful way to interact, a better way. And we have a window of time coming up, 2012. 2 + 1 + 2 is 5. That's a window. The human pen is assigned that date, just like the human pen wrote all of those scrolls and wrote everything else that ever been written on cave walls, animal skins, books, movies, theaters, typing on the computer. That's all one pen. That's the human pen. That's the master kingdom that can scribe and record its impressions of what this creation, what this world is about. And that human pen scribes two ways. One by making marks out there, and the other is by using the water cove to make marks on the world.